Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey, Yehuda in South Carolina, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Shandora in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, John in Maine. Sharon asking, are you all okay? I know your neighborhood was rocked by anti-Semitic creeps. It wasn't actually our neighborhood. We live in Hancock Park here in Los Angeles, and it's the other Jewish neighborhood, Pico Robertson, which is not far away, but it is a separate neighborhood. And indeed, I probably would have been there because a lot of my teammates on Magen were helping, serving, providing security for this event that was at a show called Adis Torah, which was about people who are interested in purchasing property in Israel. And the creeps thought that that was an opportunity for them to, protest. And, these days the peaceful protest is not so peaceful. It turned into a real balagan, an absolute mess. Magen was able to provide security to the synagogue and make sure that the people who wanted to attend that event were able to enter and leave in peace. The problem was that the peaceful protest, which was supposed to be across the street from the synagogue, was not peaceful. There were a bunch of people who created a counter-protest in favor of Israel and against these masked creeps. And a whole bunch of fights erupted. The Magen guys stopped a lot of these fights in the beginning, but as it became more riot-like, it came absolutely outside the scope of the security that Magen was trying to provide to the synagogue. And so they stepped back. LAPD did not have the manpower to break this up. More LAPD came, but it seemed basically like, from what I'm hearing, the city did not have our back, our meaning the Jews. And so there was just a lot of fighting going on. This is a terrible situation. I don't know where this is headed. Nowhere good. I don't know who was involved in the counter protests. I know that their basic attitude was, never again means we don't take this lying down. If they're chanting that Jews should die, etc., we're going to stand up for ourselves, and then this fighting, i.e. violence, ensued. So certainly the situation was fluid and complex, and I wasn't there. So that's as much as I have heard that I can report to you. I wasn't there because we were having an encore screening of Guns and Moses. So that's what I can report back on that. Also in the house, Randy in Florida, Joe in the Inland Empire, Jonathan in Thousand Oaks, Karen in Northern California, Belle in Texas, Frank in San Pedro, Aoife in Florida, Chaim in Florida, Marie in Freeport. Welcome, everybody. Let's do some learning. But let me just quickly mention that tomorrow, I'm so sorry, but it's another special time class. I'm participating in a fundraising event for Parkinson's. This is a little bit different than what we're normally doing, but some very close friends of mine organized a fundraiser for Parkinson's. I support them because they support me when we do fundraisers, and that's taking me out of town. So tomorrow. So definitely special time. Couldn't even be at noon Pacific, which is our usual special time. So it's going to be 10 a.m. Pacific. I'm sure it's convenient for nobody. But the time tomorrow is 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll put a reminder of that on the Facebook page like we try to do whenever we have a special time. And I am proceeding from the philosophy that odd time, unusual time, special time is better than no time. Okay, so obviously when you can't tune in live, at least the new class will be on the page tomorrow, available in Facebook, YouTube, and through our app, the AT app. We haven't done a formal release of the AT app because so much is going on, but it is available for both Apple and Google in the app stores. So please get that. It's an awesome way to access all accidental Talmudist content through the AT app. But at any rate, tomorrow, special time, 10 a.m. Pacific. Okay. Our daf today is page 115 here in Tractate Bava, Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We are continuing our discussion of Mishna number 12 here in chapter 9, the penultimate chapter of the tractate. We are really close to the siyum. It's going to be, I think, either Thursday or Friday of this week. We pick this up at the bottom of page 114b. Mission number 12 was all about what kind of collateral can a lender seize. Rabbi Yochanan said if the lender took collateral from the borrower and he returned it, why would he take it and return it if the loan is still outstanding? Because it was a poor person who wasn't paying back the loan, so you seized his garment or some other property, but it's something that he needs, right? So the Torah says if you take his garment, you have to give it back so he can wear it during the day. If you take his pillow or his cloak that he needs at night, you have to give it back to him at night. If you take his plow, he needs to have it during the day so that he can eke out some kind of a living. So you have to return it to him. So you have to return it every day or every night. So why are you seizing it, right? I mean, it's not like he's coming back to you to give it to you during the day. If he's got to have it at night, you're seizing it each time. And then you have to give it back every night. I mean, what is the point? Now they're explaining it. So if he took collateral from him and he returned it, and then the debtor died, so then the creditor may take the collateral from the debtor's children, his heirs, and he is under no obligation to leave it with them, right? So the borrower owed some amount of money. The debtor seized collateral to push the guy to pay back his loan. He has to return it each night. Let's say it's a pillow. But then the guy dies. So now his children, his heirs, they don't get the pillow. The pillow goes to the creditor where it's going to be used to pay off the loan. And that's why you would seize it, even though you have to keep giving it back, so that you would have established this presumptive right to that property, which is now collateral, and it will not be inherited by the debtor's heirs because it was seized during his lifetime, even if it had to be returned because he's poor. Now, the Gemara raised an objection to this from a Baraisa. Rabbi Meir said, but since one takes collateral, why does he return it? And the Gemara expresses surprise at this question. Why does he return it? Because the merciful one states in his Torah that you have to return it, right? If it's the lower millstone, or if it's the plow, or if it's the pillow, as we just described. That's why he returns it. So rather, the question is as follows. Since the creditor has to return it every day, why does he go back and take it again? As the creditor must restore it to the debtor the following day anyway. And now the Gemara explains any loan that is secured by collateral is not canceled by the sabbatical year, in contrast to other debts which are canceled. Therefore, seizing the collateral ensures that the sabbatical year will not cancel it. And the additional reason is so that the collateral should not become movable property in the possession of the debtor's heirs, so that when he dies, normally the creditor could not seize it, but here, since he's already established it as collateral for this loan, he can seize it from the heirs. And the Gemara infers the reason that these exceptions apply is that he goes back and he takes it as collateral. But if he did not go back and take it as collateral, these exceptions do not apply. And the Baraisa therefore contradicts the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who held that the initial seizing of collateral is sufficient to grant the creditor full rights to it. Does he have to keep seizing it so that the debt won't be canceled by the sabbatical year, or so that the collateral can be seized even from the debtor's heirs? Or is it enough that he seized it once and then he returned it? So Rav Ada Bar Matana said, and did you not resolve this Baraisa once already by adjusting its wording slightly? Answer it by changing its formulation again like this. And since one must return the collateral, why does one take collateral at the outset? It is done so that the sabbatical year should not cancel the debt, and so that it should not become movable property in the possession of his children. And this version is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, as it teaches that one who has taken collateral, even on a single occasion, may confiscate it from the debtor's heirs. They shouldn't inherit something that their father no longer had a right to, essentially because he borrowed money and couldn't pay it back. Now, the sages taught, the verse states, when you lend your neighbor any manner of loan, you shall not go into his house to take his collateral. We've already discussed this. It's Deuteronomy 24:10. Now, this verse indicates that you may not enter his house, but you may enter the house of a guarantor to take collateral from him. Right? What is the guarantor? Somebody is going to borrow money. There's no confidence that this guy's ever going to pay it back. He has failed to repay loans in the past, so he's not going to be able to borrow money. But he has a friend who will step in and say, listen, okay, my buddy is not very good with paying back loans, but I'll guarantee the loan, meaning that if this guy doesn't pay back the loan, the friend who steps in as a guarantor, he will pay back the loan. Okay, so it happens. The money gets lent to the irresponsible chap. He doesn't pay back the loan, so now the lender looks to the guarantor and says, okay, you said you would guarantee your friend's repayment of the debt. He hasn't paid. Now you pay me. And then the friend, the guarantor, he doesn't pay either. So at that point, the lender can seize collateral from the guarantor. And do the same rules apply about that you cannot enter the house of the borrower in order to seize collateral? Do those rules also apply to the guarantor? Or perhaps for the guarantor, you can enter his house and seize the collateral. And similarly, it states, take his garment. This is surety for a stranger. Maybe you can't take the garment of the borrower because the Torah says so, but you can take the garment of the guarantor. So the sages taught. The verse states, when you lend your neighbor any manner of loan, you shall not go into his house to take his collateral. I'm sorry, I just said that. Yeah, that's what I just read. So you can't enter his house, but you can enter the house of the guarantor. And it further states with regard to the same issue, my son. This is from Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. My son, if you are a guarantor for your neighbor, if you have struck hands for a stranger, you are ensnared by the words of your mouth. You are caught by the words of your mouth. So do this now, my son, and deliver yourself. When you have come into the hand of your friend, go humble yourself and strengthen your friend. So at least the surface reading is, yeah, well, when you said you would guarantee the loan, you committed yourself, and now you can lose property because of that. It wasn't just words that you spoke so that he'd be able to get a loan, but you didn't think it would ever come back and bite you. It will, right? If your friend is somebody who needs a guarantor and you are that guarantor, well, then don't be surprised if the lender comes knocking on your door. Now, this passage in Proverbs is interpreted as follows. The phrase, you are snared by the words of your mouth, this is referring to a guarantor who obligated himself to pay, or one who upset his friend with his comments. Right? So very interesting that these two things are compared. What does one have to do with the other? That if by speaking words you said, sure, I'll guarantee my friend's debt, and then it comes, and the lender's knocking on your door and he's going to take your property because your friend didn't pay his debt. What is the relationship between that and speaking lashon hara, speaking gossip about your friend, or even speaking directly to his face and being critical? And now you've upset him, right? So in other words, we get that somebody who speaks and makes a financial commitment to be a guarantor, that can come back and bite him. That we get that, it's pretty clear. But we think that when we just say stuff to our friends, and they ask us for our opinion on something, or, they're very proud of a new project, and we say, yeah, good work, very nice. Maybe it could have been a little different. And he ends up upset because he's been working for years on that project, and you, without thinking about it, just offered, your unthinking, overly honest opinion, shall we say. You would think that, well, what does that mean? He asked me for an opinion, I gave it, And what we're being told is you got to think through what comes out of your mouth, because you end up getting yourself into situations where your words matter just like they matter when you're making a financial commitment. So if you get yourself ensnared like this, either because you've made a financial guarantee for someone, or because you were being critical or whatever, being overshared, and now your words have gotten you in trouble, so then what should you do? In such a case, one should do like this. If he has money in your hand, go humble yourself, which is expounded as release for him the palm of your hand to give him his money. In other words, if you owe money, either because you borrowed or because you guaranteed somebody else's debt, okay, well, you owe, pay. And if it is not money that you owe, but rather you have become ensnared by the words of your mouth, and what you owe is an apology for a personal slight, okay? So then gather together many neighbors through which to seek his forgiveness, right? If he won't talk to you so you don't get the opportunity to extend your apology, well, then send, many agents, like mutual friends, and say, Sal feels really bad. He'd really like to apologize. Please see him so that he can apologize, and do it more than once. And that way, you will get yourself out of this trap in which you have ensnared yourself. And the verse, when you lend your neighbor any manner of loan, you shall not go into his house to take his collateral. That's the Torah law we're talking about with collateral. this can be interpreted in a different direction, meaning in another manner. You may not enter his house to take collateral for the loan, but if he owes wages, well, then you may enter and take collateral for a porter's wages, for a donkey driver's wages, for an innkeeper's payment, or for the wages of one who made drawings for him. One might have thought that this applies even if the one owed the money establishes it as a loan for the one who owes the money after he has already become liable for such a payment. Therefore, the verse states any manner of loan, which demonstrates that once the debt has been converted into a loan, it is like any other loan, and therefore one may not take collateral against the debtor's will. So interesting that if one owes wages, okay, so then you can enter his house and take collateral. But if you already agreed that the wages would be considered a loan that could be paid back later, then you cannot enter and take collateral. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 12 here in chapter 9. Here's Mishnah 13. With regard to a widow, whether she is poor or whether she is wealthy, one may not take collateral from her. As it is stated, Deuteronomy 24:17, and you may not take the garment of a widow as collateral. Gemara. The sages taught, with regard to a widow, whether she is poor or whether she is wealthy, one may not take collateral from her. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, with regard to a wealthy widow, one may take collateral from her. But with regard to a poor widow, one may not take collateral from her because you are obligated to return it to her in accordance with the halacha, the law, that the collateral of a poor person must be returned to him whenever he needs it. And since you will be entering every day to return the collateral to her, you will thereby give her a bad name among her neighbors, as they will suspect her of developing an inappropriate relationship with you. You're coming and going because you're a creditor seizing collateral, but people will think you're entering her house for a different reason. By contrast, in the case of a wealthy widow, since there is no obligation to return her collateral, it is permitted to take collateral from her. Right? That's how Rabbi Shimon interprets this. So the Gemara asks, is this to say that Rabbi Yehuda does not interpret the rationale behind the mitzvah in the verse and draw halakhic conclusions based on that interpretation? And Rabbi Shimon does interpret the rationale behind the mitzvah in the verse. Right? The verse says, you shall not take a garment as collateral from a widow. And why is that? Right? So is it to say that Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't matter what the reason is? The Torah said, don't take the garment. And Rabbi Shimon says, well, no, the reason matters. And the reason is because you'll be coming and going, because you have to return it if she's poor. But if she's wealthy, you don't have to return it, so it's okay to take it in the first place, right? That the reason for the mitzvah affects how we enforce the mitzvah. It seems like Rabbi Yehuda says, well, what's written is what's written. The reason doesn't matter. And it seems like Rabbi Shimon says, no, the reason does matter, and it affects how we enforce this commandment. But if that's so, then we have a problem, because it seems that elsewhere Rabbi Yehuda does amend the mitzvah, as it were. He does modulate the commandment according to the reason why it was given, and Rabbi Shimon doesn't, right? The reverse of what we see here. And where do we see that? As it is taught in a Mishnah, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 21a, concerning the commandment of a king, and he shall not multiply wives for himself, commas of course added, there are no commas in the Torah, but here's what it says, and he shall not multiply wives for himself, comma, that his heart not turn away. Right, so there the Torah adds a rationale for why a king should not multiply wives. Right? Who was the most famous example of a king that multiplied wives? Now, King David had more than one wife, but it seems he didn't violate this commandment. It's not that you can't have more than one, right? In ancient times, men were allowed to have more than one wife. The question is, when do you become liable for transgressing this commandment, don't multiply wives? It would seem that David's son Solomon must have transgressed this because he had 1,000 wives. Maybe he could have had 1,000 wives and not had his heart turned away. But it definitely became a problem, right? Because even though Solomon was the wisest and many would say the most righteous king ever, who wrote Proverbs and who wrote Ecclesiastes and did so much good, and he built the temple, but that those 1,000 wives, eventually, some of those wives were committing avodah zarah, they were committing idolatry in the kingdom, and they caused him many problems. And then there's the whole midrash about how King Solomon was exiled because of his dealings with the demon king, and he lost the throne for a while until he was able to find his way back. So, when does a king become guilty of transgressing the prohibition, don't multiply wives? That's what's being asked here. And it seems related to these added words that are in the Torah, that his heart not turn away. So let's keep reading. Okay. And he should not multiply wives for himself, that his heart not turn away. That's Deuteronomy 17:17. So about that verse, Rabbi Yehuda says, he may not accumulate many wives for himself, Rabbi Yehuda says he may accumulate many wives for himself. It's not that he can't have many wives. He may have many wives, provided that they are not like those wives who turn his heart away from reverence for God. Rabbi Shimon says, even one wife who turns his heart away, he should not marry her. If so, why is it stated he shall not multiply wives for himself? And this teaches that even with regard to wives like Abigail, in English Abigail, who was a very righteous woman, as she prevented Solomon's father, King David, from sinning. We learn this in 1 Samuel chapter 25. This teaches that even with regard to righteous women like Abigail, the king is forbidden to have many of them. In this case, Rabbi Shimon does not interpret the rationale of the verse, while Rabbi Yehuda does interpret its rationale. Right, so who was Abigail? She was the wife of a fellow named Naval. So when David was on the run, right, from King Saul, right, Shaul HaMelech, the first king of Israel, and Shaul was a very problematic king, and eventually had the crown stripped away from him, so his son Jonathan did not become the next king. Instead, David was anointed and became the next king. But there were many years when Shaul, right, King Saul, was trying to kill King David, and David was on the run. Now, he wasn't on the run alone. He had his men, and David was such a righteous guy that he didn't, even though the king was trying to kill him, he didn't want to be at war with the king of Israel. So he was just on the run. But, it got very difficult for David. And there were times when he was fighting on behalf of Israel against the Philistines. And even so, the king was trying to kill him because the king was threatened by David. He could sense, perhaps, that David was going to become the next king. And so you had this incident where David and his men were on the run, and they were hungry. Now, they were protecting the people of Israel, the children of Israel, in the land of Israel on the border from their enemies, right, the Philistines. And so one thing that they needed in return for having this warrior force that was protecting the people on the border from, military incursions, terrorist incursions, as it were, they needed to be fed. And so King David, who provided all this protection, said, okay, now we've protected you a bunch of times. You'd be dead if it wasn't for us. We need some food. So send us some meat and bread, etc. And this guy, Naval, said, yeah, no. Who's David to me that I should feed him? He said, no. David got really angry at that and said, well, in that case, let what was going to happen to Naval happen to Naval, and I will take care of business, right? So in other words, David and his men were going to kill Naval and his employees. And at that point, Naval's wife, who was much smarter than Naval, ran out to meet David and his men and said, my husband's an idiot. I apologize. Here is the food and beverage that you guys need and that my husband should have sent. Please don't kill my husband. And David said, okay, this woman is very righteous. I respect her. I will not kill her husband and his men because she asked for that. And David spared them. All right. And David considered that she had kept him from committing a rash act that, maybe wouldn't have been so good. And in fact, God took care of the problem. God struck down Naval. He just got like some kind of disease, heart condition, heart attack. I'm not sure exactly what, but he died like 10 days after this incident of natural causes, or at least causes brought on by God. And then at that point, David sent a marriage proposal to Abigail, and she became his wife. So the concept here is that Abigail saved David from any kind of questionable behavior even before she became his wife. She was an utterly righteous woman, and she kept him from sinning even before she became his wife. So if you're looking for a wife, that's good wife material. Somebody who's going to keep you on the straight and narrow even before she marries you, and how much more so she'll keep you on the straight and narrow after she marries you. So here what they're saying is, even such a wife, a king should not have many wives like her, because once you have many wives, you're invariably gonna, fall off that straight and narrow. What you need is one righteous woman to be your wife, not many. That's according to one view. The other view is, no, if she's righteous like Abigail, then you can have many wives like her. Kings tend to need many wives. Why? Because they make treaties, and engage in diplomacy. That's why Solomon had so many wives. It wasn't that, he was some kind of, sex maniac. That's not why he had many wives. He was creating treaties with neighboring nations. And that's why his empire, the nation in his time was so rich and at peace with the neighbors, is that Solomon in his wisdom was able to negotiate peace through diplomacy, and having a bunch of wives was part of that. But nonetheless, it ended up being a snare to him. Okay, let's keep going. So the point is that it seems like, at least in that verse about multiplying wives, Rabbi Shimon just says, follow the law, and he doesn't interpret the rationale of the verse, and Rabbi Yehuda does interpret its rationale, which was the opposite when it came to seizing collateral from a widow. So the Gemara answers, actually, Rabbi Yehuda does not generally interpret the rationale of the verse, but it is different here with regard to a king, as the verse itself specifies the reason, and he should not multiply wives for himself, that his heart not turn away. And what is the reason that he may not multiply wives for himself? It is because he must ensure that his heart will not turn away. The Torah spells out the rationale. Usually it doesn't. And Rabbi Shimon maintains, since we generally do interpret the rationale in the verse, there is no need for the verse itself to supply the rationale for the prohibition. So let the merciful one state, he may not multiply, and we don't need the Torah to add that his heart not turn away, as I would already know the answer to the question, what is the reason that a king should not accumulate many wives? It is because of the concern that his heart not turn away from service of God. If he's so busy with all these queens, his heart will be turned away from God. So if so, why does the Torah actually spell out explicitly that his heart not turn away? It must certainly be necessary in order to increase the scope of the prohibition. This phrase is not just teaching the rationale. It's coming to teach us something new. Meaning, even if there is one woman who turns his heart away, he may not marry her. Therefore, the verse includes two laws: a general stricture against a king's marrying too many women, and an additional law that a king may not marry even one woman if there is reason to think that she will lead him astray from the service of God. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 13 here in chapter 9. Now, Mishnah 14. One who takes a millstone as collateral violates a prohibition, and he is liable for taking two vessels, i.e. both millstones in the pair. As it is stated, he shall not take the lower or upper millstone as collateral. And the Tana adds, not only did the sages say that it is prohibited to take the lower or upper millstone as collateral, but they also said that one may not take anything that people use in the preparation of food, as it is stated, for he takes a man's life, his nefesh, as collateral. Right? You cannot take from a person as collateral something that will make it difficult or impossible for him to sustain himself. That's Mishnah number 14. The Gemara. Rav Huna says, one who took a lower millstone as collateral is flogged with two sets of lashes, meaning he violated two prohibitions. One set of lashes is due to violating the prohibition of taking the lower millstone as collateral, which is explicitly stated in the Torah. And the second set of lashes is due to, for he takes a man's life as collateral, since he took an item used in the preparation of food. If he took the lower and upper millstone, then he is flogged with three sets of lashes. Two sets of lashes are due to violating the prohibitions of taking a lower or upper millstone, and he did both. And the third set of lashes is due to violating the prohibition, for he takes a man's life as collateral. And Rav Yehuda says, if he took a lower millstone as collateral, he is flogged with one set of lashes. If he took an upper millstone, he is flogged with one set of lashes. And if he took both the lower and the upper millstones together as collateral, he is flogged with two sets of lashes. And with regard to the verse, for he takes a man's life as collateral, this comes to teach about the prohibition against taking as collateral other items used in the preparation of food. Very interesting interpretation. I would suggest a more useful one, right? In other words, was the Torah only speaking about lower and upper millstones? It's this phrase, where it says, for he takes a man's life as collateral, it teaches you not about millstones, but that you can't take anything from a man as collateral, which will prevent him from sustaining himself. We are on page 115b. The Gemara suggests, shall we say that Abaye and Rava, in a different dispute, disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of this dispute between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda concerning the collateral. So it goes like this. The Torah commands with regard to the preparation of the Pesach, right? The Pesach is the Paschal offering, the Passover lamb offering that we would bring when the tabernacle was standing and later when the Holy Temple was standing. Once the second temple was destroyed, we no longer brought the Passover lamb offering. We learned all about it in Tractate Pesach. Okay, so the Torah commands with regard to the preparation of the Pesach, do not eat of it raw, nor cooked in water, but rather roasted with fire, its head with its legs, with the innards thereof. That's Exodus 12:9. So Abaye and Rava engage in a dispute concerning the case of one who ate the meat when it was not properly roasted, right? So when you eat the Pesach, which you have to slaughter in the courtyards of the temple, and then its blood is dashed on the altar, and then you bring it back to the group that you've already registered in advance that your group would share the Pesach together. on the night of Passover, when you went up to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover while the temple was standing, all these things. So the point is that now that you're going to eat it, the Torah was very specific. You can't eat it raw and you can't eat it boiled. You don't make a stew out of it, but you take that whole lamb and roast it over a spit, right? Roast it over a fire. And if you don't cook it that way, then you have violated this prohibition. As Rava says, if he ate an olive bulk, right, a katsayas, just a volume, about the size of an olive, if he ate an olive bulk of it raw, so he is flogged with 2 sets of lashes. One set of lashes is due to the prohibition, do not eat of it raw. And the other is due to the prohibition, but roasted with fire, right? So you violated the commandment that don't eat it raw, and you violated the commandment that you have to eat it roasted. Those are 2 different commandments, therefore 2 sets of lashes. If he ate an olive bulk of the Pesach that had been cooked, meaning boiled in water, he is also flogged with 2 sets of lashes. One set of lashes because you ate something boiled that the Torah said don't eat it cooked in water. And the second is due to the injunction, but you have to eat it roasted with fire, which you did not do. If he ate an olive bulk of both raw meat and cooked meat, he is flogged with 3 sets of lashes. One due to the prohibition against eating raw, 1 set of lashes due to the prohibition on eating it cooked in water, and the third due to the prohibition, don't eat of it in any other way but roast it in the fire. Conversely, Abigail says the prohibition, do not eat of it except roasted with fire, is not referring exclusively to this issue, but rather it includes many cases, and one is not flogged for violating a general prohibition. So in this case, Abigail and Rava apparently disagree over the same matter as do Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. So shall we say that Abigail states his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rav Yehuda, and Rava states his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna? In other words, have we drawn a proper parallel to the disagreement between the sages when it comes to taking 2 millstones, and then did you also violate? Don't take a man's soul because you took his millstones, or is it that don't take his millstones is actually teaching something else entirely, that it's not only about millstones, it's anything that you take that is his sustenance? And are we going to draw a parallel between that dispute to this idea that, well, when you eat the Pesach, the Torah says don't eat it raw and don't eat it cooked in water, but only roasted? Right? So but does only roasted mean that if you ate it raw or cooked, then you didn't eat it roasted, and so that's what you violated? But only roasted actually refers to all kinds of other things as well, and therefore it's not strictly connected to the injunction, don't eat it raw or boiled in water. It's a nuance here of trying to understand exact logic of the argument. So if it's a little confusing, just bear with it. Stay with it. Let's see if it'll become clear. So the Gemara responds, no, these things are not parallel, because Rava could have said to you, I state my opinion even in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as there is a difference between the 2 cases. Rabbi Yehuda states his opinion only there with regard to collateral, because the phrase, for he takes a man's life as collateral, does not itself indicate that the verse is referring to the lower and upper millstones. There could be some other way of sustaining himself that has nothing to do with millstones, and that verse covers it. And therefore it is a general statement and is needed, and therefore it comes to teach about the prohibitions as taking as collateral other items that are used in the preparation of food, not to add an additional prohibition related to lower and upper millstones. But here in the case of the phrase, but roasted with fire, comes for what purpose? It excludes only raw or cooked meat, which were already mentioned. Therefore, learn from it that it comes to include another prohibition in addition to these specific directives referring to raw and cooked meat. Meaning, it doesn't teach you some other aspect of the law. It's just that if you ate the Pesach raw or cooked, you violated 2 prohibitions listed in the Torah. It's not that it's teaching you about some other kind of prohibition. And Abigail could have said to you, I state my opinion even in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna. And this is because Rav Huna states his opinion only there with regard to collateral, because the prohibition for he takes a man's life as collateral is superfluous and therefore includes other utensils as well. Since it is superfluous, apply it to another prohibition with respect to the lower and upper millstones. But here, with regard to the Pesach, the phrase, but roasted with fire, is not superfluous, as he requires it for that which is taught in a baraisa. What's this additional prohibition? At the time when one is included in the mitzvah, in the commandment, to arise and eat the roasted Pesach lamb or goat, he is also included in the prohibition not to eat of it raw. But at a time when one is not included in the mitzvah to arise and eat the roasted Pesach, he is not included in the prohibition not to eat of it raw either. And what does that mean? Consequently, one who eats the Pesach offering at that time is not liable to receive lashes. So in other words, those additional words could come to teach us something about the timing of eating the Pesach and how we are eating it. We're on page 116a. I'm going to go just a little bit further so that we can finish chapter 9. The Gemara returns to the dispute concerning the lower and upper millstones. It is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rav Yehuda. If one took as collateral barber's scissors or a pair of cows, he is liable to receive 2 sets of lashes. If he took this one blade of the pair of scissors by itself or that one cow by itself, he is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes. So according to this Tana, he is not liable for the general prohibition. And it is taught in another baraisa, if one took as collateral the scissors of a barber or a pair of cows from a dairy farmer, one might have thought that he is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes. Therefore, the verse states he may not take as collateral the lower or upper millstone. And this indicates that just as the lower and upper millstones are unique in that they are 2 distinct vessels and they perform one task together, and nevertheless one is liable separately for this and separately for that, so too with regard to all items that are composed of 2 individual vessels, such as the barber's scissors or a pair of cows, and they perform one task, he is liable separately for this and separately for that. And the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who took as collateral a slaughtering knife from another, right? A knife, a special knife used for shechting animals, for kosher slaughter of animals. So he came before Abigail to ask him what to do. And Abigail said to him, go and return it, as it is a vessel used in the preparation of food, and it is therefore forbidden to take as collateral. And go stand in judgment, i.e. litigate with the debtor in court concerning how much money he owes you. And Rava said he does not have to stand in judgment for this. Since the knife is in his possession, he can claim the amount of the debt up to the value of the knife. And the Gemara asks, and does Abigail not accept that reasoning, that one who seized an item belonging to a debtor may claim the sum owed to him for the value up to the value of the item? In what way is it different from the incident involving those goats that ate peeled barley in Nehardea, and the owner of the peeled barley came and seized the goats and claimed that their owner was indebted to him for a large amount? And Shmuel's father, who acted as a judge in this case, said that he can only claim up to their value. And the Gemara answers that there is a difference between the 2 cases. There, a goat is an item that is not usually lent out or rented. Consequently, the one who possesses them has a presumptive right of ownership upon which he can base his claim. Conversely, here, the slaughtering knife is an item that is usually lent out or rented. Therefore, he is not deemed credible without proof that it is his merely by virtue of it being in his possession. And the Gemara supports this distinction, as Rav Huna bar Avin sent the following ruling: in case of items that are usually lent out or rented, and one in possession of them says they were acquired by me, he is not deemed credible by his claim alone. He must provide further proof, as he might have borrowed or rented them rather than seize them as collateral. I'm so close to done. Please get your comments and questions in now. And the Gemara adds, and does Rava not accept this reasoning? But didn't Rava himself remove scissors used for wool and a scroll of agada from the possession of orphans as items that are usually lent out or rented? And the Gemara answers, Rava could have said to you, with regard to this slaughtering knife too, since it is likely to be damaged, people are particular and do not lend it out. Therefore, it is not considered an item that is typically lent out, and the one in possession of it can claim the money owed to him up to the value of the knife, meaning that he seized it as collateral, not he received it as a loan, and now he's claiming that it was seized as collateral. And that concludes our journey through chapter 9 here in Tractate Bava Metzia. With God's help, we'll begin tomorrow at the special time, right? Tomorrow, special time, 10 a.m. Pacific. Sorry about that. It's the only time that I can teach the class tomorrow, and I thought better to teach at a special time than not to teach the class tomorrow. So 10 a.m. Pacific tomorrow, we'll pick it up on page 116b. Okay, couple of questions here on page 115. Bill, I suspect one of the reasons that a multitude of wives, even if they were every one of them like Abigail, the righteous Abigail, is that a king with many such wives, at a certain point, stops thinking of them as wives. He no longer has the deep relationship that spouses should have. Beautiful observation, Bill, right? Because what is the correct relationship that spouses should have, especially a man charged with ruling a kingdom, right? He needs an ezer kenegdo, right? That is the description of the relationship between Adam and Eve. So the ezer kenegdo is a helpmate opposite him, right? And as we've discussed before, what does that mean? That means that when he's acting righteously, she helps him do what he's trying to do. And when he strays from the straight and narrow and he's acting wickedly or selfishly or gossiping or, whatever he's doing that's problematic, she will point that out to him. And they've developed a relationship of trust where he's going to realize that the person who knows him best is giving him honest rebuke and telling him you're going in the wrong direction, and God willing, he'll listen to her and reverse course. Even if he's so angry at the moment he can't hear it, hopefully he'll hit that holy pause button, take a breath, think about what she said, and get back on track. But if he's got many wives, he's not going to have that one person that he trusts and who's spending all the time with him and can see exactly what he's doing. She's certainly not going to be an ezer kenegdo to him if she's one of, dozens or hundreds or 1,000 wives. Very good observation. Okay, and Heather is saying, what if the house is the collateral and that's what you owe? LOL. In other words, I think what you're asking is, can the lender enter the house to seize the collateral? Well, what if the collateral is the house? Then what? Then what do we do? Great question. I'm not sure, because what we've been talking about that you can't seize and then you have to give it back is movable property, right? We haven't talked about using real property. In other words, and that is property that's real property, real estate, is known as property that can serve as a guarantee. So it's in a totally different class than movable property. I think it's outside the scope of what we're talking about here, right? When you say that land was used as collateral for a loan, it's not called collateral. It's called a guarantee for the loan. And so these halachas that we're talking about here about seizing it, whether you have to give it back or not, a poor person not, land is a separate kind of conversation. Of course, it can be used to guarantee a loan, but it's going to be a different legal process for that. That's what I've got for us tonight, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday, special time, 10 a.m. Pacific. Have a great night.